listen and listen good.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure whatever they vaccinated them against, it wasn't enough.
It's the Cooper and Anthony Show.
So thank you so much for joining us. We had a million things we've been dying to ask you for a while because there's so much going on in the world of comedy. And as you know, you're our favorite comedian and like the smartest person we know. So we were like, okay, two good things.
Raise the bar.
And you own a mic.
Right.
And yes.
Yeah.
Check all those boxes.
Yeah, no, that drives us crazy. Like, I can't tell you how often I'll be a guest on some show of somebody that should, or we'll have like celebrities on here. I won't say who, but we'll have like big name celebrities, and they're like yelling across the room. It's like you can't.
It's crazy.
Just have an assistant run out and buy a $10 mic for you.
Yeah, you'll see on MSNBC, they'll be like interviewing a congressperson, and they're just talking into their crappy MacBook Air microphone. This is not, I'm not living on Easy Street, and somehow I managed to pick myself up a USB microphone.
Right.
It's not it's not a major life investment. It's not going to depreciate. Like, you don't have to lease it. You can just
Exactly.
go buy one.
Yeah, it's a good point. So we like having you on for that as well. So before we get into the funny stuff, did you have a relationship with Bob Saget? Did you have anything? What were your thoughts about him in general? No, because we've heard so many great things about him.
I know.
And yeah,
I think I'm the only person in the comedy world who does not have a personal relationship with Bob Saget. Like,
really?
To his credit, I mean, I never lived in LA, and he was always, at least since I started comedy, was always a Los Angeles dude. And so I think most of the people know him from that, in that context. And culturally, he was kind of he was not in my cultural wheelhouse growing up,
much older,
I was too old for Full House, and America's Funniest Home Videos is what my friends would all make fun of and insult all the time. You know what I mean? Now I see it as like, oh, this was like a real comic, and this was a gig he took, because I would take that gig too. You're on television, like, it affords you the ability to go out and tour and do the kind of stand-up act you want to. But if you had told me as a teenager that like one day people are going to be really upset that Bob Saget passed away, I would have called you a liar.
Right.
It would have been ridiculous.
Who is Bob Saget? Yeah.
Yeah. Or it would have not even knew who is Bob Saget, but it's just like, you mean the home videos guy? Like, people,
right.
People are upset about it. Like, and I'm not questioning the people who, because apparently he really was just a prince of a human being. And as a stand-up comic, I thought he was really funny. And obviously the Aristocrats is great. And, so I have a lot of respect for the dude, but it's weird how life is long.
So who are the comics that influenced you? Like, when you were a little baby comic growing up, who did you look at and go, oh, that's the career I want. That's the person that influenced me the most.
Well, it's funny, I never had any aspirations to do stand-up comedy until maybe 2 weeks before I started doing it.
You're kidding.
No, I mean, when I think back, I was a comedy obsessed kid, but I never really thought of it as a path for me. Mm-hmm. I had, of course, I was in those, I'm 48. And so I grew up, when cable was introduced, and they really only had like 12 properties that they could air on HBO.
Right.
But one of them was like Bill Cosby himself. And so I must have seen Bill Cosby himself 500 times. And obviously that has been colored strangely over the years, my memories of that. But, I can't deny that it was one of the biggest influences on me. And of course, all the things in that generation, Eddie Murphy Delirious, my dad was kind of introduced me to George Carlin. So I had like George Carlin, Class Clown, and Steve Martin probably. I remember for Christmas one year, I got a Steve Martin live. It was called Homage to Steve.
Uh-huh.
It was him at sort of the height, he's playing arenas with the white suit and the arrow through the head and all that. And that I think I wore out that videotape.
Wow.
But yeah, so I mean, they were influences, but not in an overt way.
Yeah.
When I actually started doing stand-up, it was people like Janine Garofalo, because I kind of came to it from like, I was a big fan of like Kids in the Hall and then the Ben Stiller Show. And so when I first started watching a lot of stand-up, it was kind of in through that sort of 90s alt window. Those are my favorites too. Like, I have the same thing where, like, I remember Janine Garofalo to me was just like, she was my generation in every way, shape, or form. Like, exactly. I mean, even her getting up there with just some scraps of paper and being like, let me try this joke. Okay, that didn't work. Yeah. Throw it away. Completely. Yeah, because I always thought of, I grew up in the stand-up boom of the 80s. And I guess because I probably wanted to do it on some level, but hadn't admitted it to myself. I kind of made fun of stand-up comedy all the time. It's just like, oh, these are corny dudes that push up their blazer sleeves, you know what I mean? Like the purple blazer with the sleeves pushed up and the t-shirt underneath, and it seemed just irreducibly corny to me at the time. And so that kind of quote unquote alternative comedy revolution was sort of my entryway into comedy. And now what I do is probably way closer to purple blazer guy than it is to the cool kids. But I needed some sort of permission to sort of get involved or to want to get into comedy, because at the time it seemed like just painfully uncool in every way.
Have you went back and changed your act since the Me Too movement? Have you taken out some things, or do you not write certain jokes now because of you don't want to be canceled, or how does that work in your head now?
It does not work. I mean, I resist all notions. I mean, there's certainly jokes that, I mean, man, there are a lot of jokes I look back on that I used to do that I wouldn't do now.
Like what?
But I wouldn't do them not because of fear of cancellation, but I wouldn't do them because I feel differently now.
Right,
You know,
right.
A lot of times I think what happens with comics is, you know, people think that comics passionately believe the things that are coming out of their mouths. A lot of times you find an angle on something that's funny, and so you almost take on an opinion or a persona just because it's a funny premise. Do you know what I mean? Like oh my God, I found a hilarious joke about Q-tips, or, you know, and how much I hate Q-tips. You don't actually hate Q-tips, but that's just sort of you work. That's the structure of the joke.
Like, who hates Q-tips? Yeah.
Yeah. But you can fall in love with what I call the math of the joke. You know, like the joke structure is like, oh, and then I say this, and then I call back to it 30 seconds later, and it's you know, or it's got some cool wordplay, and the punchline. You know, there's sort of a misdirect. I mean, these are kind of dorky comedy terms, but where you think I'm going to say one thing and then I say another thing, and that's funny. And so sometimes you can kind of fall in love with the joke construction to where you're almost blind to what it is you're actually saying, like the opinion you're actually putting across. And I think that's specifically true of young comics, because they're just so happy that they've come up with something that makes people laugh.
Right.
They're not really thinking like, is this my worldview and do I want to stand by it? You know?
Right.
And so there's a lot of jokes I made that, you know, I was like, why would I have used that as a punchline when that's not the way I feel or ever felt? You know what I mean? So
Right. That's the hardest thing, though, because you growing up in comedy, you growing up out there, like, you know, us, I mean, I guess it's kind of the same thing. Like, we're in radio, so, but mostly we talked about pop culture and stuff. We gave our opinion, but we never said like anything about men,
I mean,
women.
I go back and listen to some of the stuff we did, and I wouldn't play it now.
Right, that's true. But it's not. But it's something we would get canceled over, because we've never been those people. We just never did. But I think in comedy it's harder, because you have to have your finger on the pulse of the culture and the moment. So you really kind of have to comment. Yeah. You have to comment on stuff that people are thinking about, right? Yeah,
and the comedic sweet spot is always right at the line between appropriate and inappropriate. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's really where a lot of the juice is. You know, unless you're just kind of a one-liner, like a Stephen Wright comic who's just kind of, or Dimitri Martin, or like where you're kind of finding sort of absurd 1 or 2 line jokes. If you're actually kind of an opinion comedian, the real exciting material is the stuff that kind of makes people feel 2 ways at once. You know, where it's like, oh, that's so wrong and that's so right, like that. And that's obviously that line is going to change over time.
But does it? I mean, how do you feel about that? Because every time I hear a comic have to defend something that they said because they were trying to be funny, or they were funny, or they're just funny, I'm always like, you know, I remember working with Joan Rivers for years. People know that I used to produce her radio show, and you know, she would say like some outrageous stuff, but she was like, "I'm a comedian, tough shit." Like that's, I mean, she didn't come up in a time people would cancel you, but she would say some pretty outrageous stuff that now she could never say, but she would still say it, even if it's something that you could never say. So what's your theory on that? What do you think about that?
I think that, you know, that sort of idea of like, oh my God, you could never say that now, is also what people were saying about blackface. you know what I mean? That I promise you, if you had gone back in time and be like, oh man, you can't joke about anything anymore. So this is a constant conversation that has been put onto hyperdrive because of social media, because now you're able to actually hear the reactions of the people that maybe you're offending. And I don't think that invalidates jokes. If the joke is funny enough, I think you should stand by it, but just expect that you're going to get some blowback. You're going to get, and also to put that blowback in context, that it's a lot of times the people who are quote unquote canceling you, they don't care about you. They're performing for their followers.
That's a good point.
They're trying to show their followers, look at what kind of person I am. I'm fighting this person.
Right. Right.
And so I kind of, Bill Burr has a real great attitude about these things. I think he's just kind of like, it's fine, whatever. Sure. When people come at him, because a lot of the things he says, I don't agree with. And to me, a lot of his jokes do fall on the other side of the line where I don't know that they're super helpful, but either he's hilarious in his mindset is just, sure, get upset. Okay, fine.
Right.
It's okay. People are allowed to be upset and people are allowed to move on. And that sort of that whiny Bill Maher contingent is just like, you just could not sound any older to me.
Right. It's so true. I feel the same way. I feel like the stuff you're complaining about just makes you sound old. Doesn't make you sound cool or woke.
No.
It makes you sound stupid.
And it's just like the last vestige of a sort of dumb comedian is to kind of to go purely for my comedy is a reaction to the reaction. That sort of I'm edgy by not being edgy. It's just such a corny, played out sort of attitude to me. And so my only feeling is, the kids are always right. Whether they always end up being right because they're the ones who are going to be alive and we're not going to be, and when they're in their 40s and 50s, the kid, it's always the 25-year-olds always determine what's going to be popular for the next.
That's scary. Somebody whose brain isn't fully developed is making decisions for the rest of us. Yikes.
And it was the same. Yeah. Nobody, we decided to make, I don't know, Creed popular. Nobody did that, I'm saying,
unfortunately, we did do that.
Yeah, we actually did do that. And she played it on the air. I played it on the air. Yeah, we did the same with Nickelback, so you can blame us.
Yeah, we can blame us for Nickelback. But we also played Nirvana, so we 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yeah, but getting mad about it is like getting mad at weather. It's just it's gonna happen whether you get mad at it or not. So why fight it?
Yeah,
adapt.
That's true.
Don't fight.
Right.
So you have a comedy gig coming up tomorrow night.
I do. Yes, I do. Just here in the city. I just have a couple shows in the city. Nothing. You got me thinking maybe I had something super. Not that these shows aren't important.
Well, I'm glad I brought that up so you remember.
No, I do. Yes, I'm doing 2 shows. One at New York Comedy Club on East 4th Street, and also at the New York Comedy Club on East 24th Street. 4th Street and 24th Street.
Oh, fantastic. When are you going to be at the one on East 24th Street?
I can tell you momentarily.
Yeah, if you go to his website, you can see all that stuff.
ChristianFinnegan.com.
Yeah. It's the 9:00 show on 24th Street. I'll be going on around 10:00, I believe.
Okay, I can make that.
So when you go on stage now, because you've been doing it so long, do you write new things for that show? Like the show tomorrow night, do you have new things, or do you just fall back on your favorite 15 that you have, or whatever?
On my laurels, always. Just I'm working. I'm anti-effort. It always, you don't do new material every show, certainly. I guess you can try, but generally you try to mix in some newer, some older. Sometimes you're on the fly, and it depends where you are in the cycle of creating an hour, because that's sort of the unit that comics work in. You're working on the new hour, and for a certain period of time, you might be in the just throwing a bunch of shit against the wall. Sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on this.
You could swear here. Fuck that. Yeah, swear.
Oops, shit. But then maybe later you're at a point where you have some material that's sort of B and you're trying to bring it up to A. And so you might be working on the same 15 minutes for a couple months or something like that. Just kind of making it muscle memory,
Right.
But everybody works a little differently. I'm trying one of my 2022, I wouldn't call it a resolutions, but one of my determinations for this year is that I really want to be more proactive about writing material as opposed to just being inspired, which I feel like is less dependable.
And so how do you write? Like, do you literally sit down and just think like, okay, Christian, brain, go? Like, what do you do?
Well, sometimes like I have a little game that I play with myself called the alphabet game, which is just, and this is just a me thing, where I will literally just go through the alphabet and I'll write down one word for every letter, just, apple, basketball, candle, and then I will try to spend 5 minutes on each word and just trying to write something with that as jumping off point. Doesn't mean it like, if the word is apple, you could be talking about fruit, you could be talking about computers, whatever. But it's sometimes a lot of it's garbage. It's kind of like stretching instead of working out, or it's like practicing instead of playing a game. But every once in a while, you'll find that limitation is freeing, that it actually gets you somewhere quicker than if you were just like, I'm going to write about whatever I want. It's like, no, don't write about whatever you want. Write about scissors for a couple minutes. Right. And strangely, even though it's obviously not an emotional word, scissors or whatever, it'll bring up some memory of like, oh my God, that kid who stabbed me in the face in 3rd grade with a pair of scissors, whatever, and then all of a sudden you're off to the races.
Yeah, there's something funny in there. All right, so whenever you come, you would like to play a little game with you. So we have a little game tonight. You ready for some gameplay? Okay, so it's a new game that I'm calling Heinous Act or I Do That.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so here are situations that people have done or gotten themselves into, and they're actually listeners of ours, and they want to know, like, do you think that what they did was heinous or act. Like, you would totally do this? Yes. Okay, one of our listeners says that they use multiple email accounts to get free birthday drinks and birthday meals throughout the year, and they can go like a whole week and eat for free.
I would do that, I think I would do that. I might not do it for like local mom and pop type restaurants. Mm-hmm. But, at, Uno's, sure.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Some Mexican restaurant chain or something like that. Yeah, absolutely. But probably not like if I know if the owner is just some horribly bent over old Greek man, like I'm not gonna...
who could barely pay his rent.
Yeah.
Right.
But I would say I would land on the side if I would do that.
Okay. How about this one? Some neighbors in my apartment building leave their shoes out in the hallway, and you're not allowed to do that in my building. So it bothered me so much, I put an anonymous note in the lobby saying, I left my shoes out and somebody took a dump in one of them, and now nobody leaves their shoes out anymore.
Of all the ways I thought that was going to go, that is so much nicer. That's like cruelty free. That like... I thought she was going to say that she stole their shoes or she threw one in the trash or something. But no, she did something that didn't hurt anyone. Just made everyone change their behavior. I think that's pretty impressive. I thought she was going to come off like very, to use an overused word, Karen-y. Because we have a very annoying downstairs neighbor who is a horrible person, and so I am very sensitive to nosy neighbors who expect peace and quiet and silence while also living in New York City.
Right.
But no, I think the way she handled it is impressive. So I wouldn't do that, but I would not call it a heinous act.
Well, what's up with your neighbor?
Well, I mean, it's sort of our fault. We have 2 dogs.
Okay.
The first couple weeks we moved in, they had real separation anxiety. We had been up the entire pandemic. We had been with them for 16 months straight up in the woods. And then all of a sudden we're having them adjust to us being out of the apartment. And so they were a little annoying, but just from day one, just like knocking on our door or I gave her my number. And so she was like texting me and calling me. And last night, I guess they were barking a little bit and she sent me like a really rude text. And then said like, "Oh, I guess you're not going to answer me." Great, just all.
Sorry, I'm on stage entertaining an entire room full of people. Sorry, I can't be there for you.
It's just the kind of person where when you walk by their door that they're looking out the keyhole just to see that kind of person.
Yeah,
and that's a very particularly kind of annoying New York neighbor. And so I am generally speaking anti. Just live your life and just accept that you live in New York and things are going to be noisy sometimes. But if you're going to handle it the way this woman handled it, it's pretty top notch.
Yeah, I've never spoken to any of my neighbors. I've been in this building 10 years.
Yeah, whatever.
I talk to
If
nobody.
it happens, yeah, it's like if you have dogs, maybe you have a little dog conversation or whatever. But no, the thing about living in New York City is that you live near people, but you're not touching them. Do you know what I mean? There's that
Right.
thin layer. There's that placenta of your apartment, if you will.
That's right.
But you're constantly aware where it's like, oh, I know my neighbor's porn habits, but I don't know his name. Like that kind of, you're near but distant at the same time.
Yes, I know how often my upstairs neighbor has sex, but I could not tell you who. Like if I saw him in an elevator, I'd be like, I don't know if is it that guy? Is it not that guy? I have
But
no
yeah,
idea
if
who
he
it
made a
is. But
certain noise or
yeah.
sound, like if he dropped a bag on his foot and he was like, oh, and you'd be like, oh, you're that guy.
Right. Well, yeah, exactly. And can you creak this spring a little? Now I can see. Yeah. All right. So here's another one from one of our listeners. He said, I used to sit in an office with a printer shared with other offices, and somebody down the hall who was a massive tool would print to the one right behind me. So I'd take the page before he arrived to get it. He'd sulk off and send it again and again and again. Then I'd put the whole pile back on the printer like they suddenly all came out at once.
That is a heinous act, but it is hilarious. I highly approve of that. That is very, very funny.
I know it's the one thing that Anthony and I was saying we miss and don't miss about working in a radio studio, be around other people at all times and those kind of quirky behavior. Like I don't miss that, but I miss it sometimes.
I don't.
Yeah,
both,
I mean that's kind of grist for the mill. Do you know what I mean? Those involuntary, annoying but not tragic interactions that you have with people on a day-to-day basis are kind of what keeps the fire in your brain going. And I think all of this working from home and isolation can be kind of deadening.
Right.
You don't see people. Things don't happen to you.
Okay,
Like
I got two.
living in
I got
Los
two more for you. Okay, so one guy says I have a weekly Zoom call with a guy that's married to a friend of mine. To mess with him, the wife texts me a photo of what he's wearing that day, so I go and wear the exact same thing. It's been
That's
18
brilliant.
months, and he still can't figure out how I end up wearing the same thing as him every time we get on the Zoom call.
Brilliant.
But yeah, I mean that's impressive. That's dedication, I will say. No, I fully endorse that.
No,
Yeah.
no, I believe that one guy is banging that one guy's wife. That's why she's texting him all the time.
Yeah.
Why would she have his number other than they're banging?
You got to escalate the drama. Always, Anthony. Always. Okay, and here's the last one. This one. Okay, listen to this. My next door neighbor texted me to ask if I could check our shed for their missing cat. But I'm lazy, so I just text back. I said, nope, not there. 2 days later, I opened the shed door, and there was the cat. When I returned it, I said I found her. Like just walking around and like, here's the cat back. They were so grateful. They gave me a really nice bottle of wine as a thank you.
Yeah. I think you're going to want to pay that bottle of wine forward. Like you don't need to give it back, but you should probably buy someone else a bottle of wine as penance.
Right.
Poor cat was
Exactly.
stuck in there for 2 days because your lazy
days.
ass couldn't get off the couch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or take better care of your
that's some weak
cat.
sauce.
Yeah, that is some weak
That's
sauce.
true,
Well, thank you so much, Christian Finnegan. We love having you on. Thank you for sharing your little secret to comedy. But it's so like you say that, and people listening, if they're interested in becoming comics, it's like they can start thinking of ways that they could. But if you're not funny, you're not funny. It doesn't. You could give up all your special sauce. It does not matter.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I fully buy that if you're not funny, you're not funny. I think if you don't. Okay, yeah, you're right. You're right. Yeah, I was going to try to talk around it.
Yeah.
I think anyone can become an okay comedian, but you have to be naturally funny to be a good comedian, I think.
Yeah, and I gotta tell you, sometimes I'm funny on the radio, and I did that. I think we've discussed this. I did that funny reporter contest where they stick you up at Gotham, and then they put you with a bunch of comedians who help you like write your act. Mm-hmm. That was the hardest thing I ever did.
It's a totally different animal. Yeah, there's certain comedians who they're like mediocre comedians, but then they get into broadcasting and they're amazing. It's like basketball and baseball are different sports. Michael Jordan was great at one. He wasn't super great at the other. That's just so people got to find what
Whoopi
their
Goldberg
gifts are.
lasted 8 months on KTU. She was terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great comic, does great, amazing actress, not a radio person. Like, that's probably not the medium for her.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I'm a comedy person. I think I'm a busboy person. Is that
Yeah. What's next? I mean, if this comedy thing doesn't work out, where do you go?
Into the garage with the ignition on?
Yeah, right.
Can you call us when you're doing that, though? So we
I
at
will,
least, yeah.
Do it on
You'll
the
be
air.
my last conversation. Sweeps week.
Thank you so much, Christian Finnegan.
Bye,
and
guys.
to find out where Christian is playing, ChristianFinnegan.com, and go see him live, because we have to support stand-up comedians. We got to support people who are out there, doing the deed.
And I'm at Christ Finnegan on all the social media platforms.